This mimer the Rebbe gave 40 years ago, and as we know, any Torah that we have that's 40 years old has a special significance, takes on a special relevance, and has a special strength. Like it says that Adar Boim Shnin L'Koi Minish Adaita the Rabbi. Till 40 years you don't get it. After 40 years you get it. That's because Moses told the Jewish people after the 40 years, towards the end of the 40 years sojourn in the desert, and God has not given you eyes to see. God has not given you a heart to perceive and eyes to see and ears to hear till this day. What does that mean? Moses was teaching them the whole 40 years. But it says that after 40 years, something is able to be totally assimilated, brought in to the person, become part and parcel of them. And the Gemara says, the Talmud tells us that when it's 40 years, you can get it. It's in the world. And it takes on a special way of understanding. It becomes part of the world after 40 years. So this mimer is exactly 40 years old. The Rebbe said it, Erev Rosh Chodesh Odar Sheni, Shabbos Shekalim. That year was Parshas Pekudei. This year it's Parshas Vayakhel. And the Rebbe began with the verse of the special Torah reading of that Shabbos, of the Shabbos of Parshas Shekalim, which is read always in proximity to Adar, because in the time of the temple, that's when the Shekalim were collected, the half shekel, and that made up everybody's participation in the offerings of the whole year. Everyone participated in every offering. So the Rebbe begins, Ki Sisa shreish Bnei Yisrael game of a nosnu ishkei for nafshe. Ze yitnu machzis shekel. The verse says, when you will uplift the head of the children of Israel, and that's a reference to how they're counted, and of course that's explained a special way of counting that uplifts us, and we're going to discuss some of this, of course. Everyone will give the atonement of their soul. This is what they should give, machzis hashekel, a half a shekel. We know the particular lessons in the discourses of our Rabbi that they learned regarding these verses. Beginning from the discourses of the Alter Rebbe, Ubedrusha and Esim Shalachrov, and in the discourses of the subsequent Rabbeim. Ad Ledibra Maschal Kishisa, Dishnas Ateres, Tafreshain Tes, Chakad Monish Maseidin, including up until the discourse which begins with these words that was delivered by the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Rebbe, in the year of 1919, 5,679, 105 years ago. Mahu teichen mitzvahs machzis hashekel. What is the mitzvah of giving a half shekel? What's it all about? The gam, the kivin sheksiv behem shchapasuk esem geira hashekel, machzis hashekel trum alavaya. And since it says in the verse, in the rest of the verse, that the shekel is made up of 20 geira, then it says give half a shekel. So it should just say everyone should give 10 geiros. That'll equal half a shekel. That's it. You don't have to say give a half a shekel. A shekel is 20 geiros. So then I know if somebody will give 10, he'll have given half. So there's something significant about this. From this we understand that there's something special about giving half a shekel particularly. We have to understand also why everyone had to give it equally. A wealthy person couldn't give more than a half a shekel, and a poor person couldn't give less. Everyone had to give precisely half a shekel. It's It's the opposite of the general way of charity giving. A person who could afford more should give more. The charity, the giving has to be according to the blessing that God blessed the person. Wealthier person has to give according to his capability, and like it has to be. Like the Talmud says explicitly in the tractate of Ksubis, yes, so the Talmud says that a person should give according to what they can afford. You should give more if you could. And here we're saying that everyone should give exactly half a shekel, which is not even a big amount. And nonetheless, a poor person for whom it may be hard for has to come up with it. And a rich person should just give that much. We don't ask for any more. This was not the UJA appeal. So, there's something very special about this. And look, if a person can afford it, so why does the Torah insist that a poor person shouldn't give less? Look, he's impoverished, and God only wants and asks a person to give what he can. So why shouldn't he give a little less? Cut him a break. Can't afford it. And what is this about that it brings about the atonement of the soul? In its simplest understanding, this is a term that refers to atonement for sin and transgression. What does atonement have to do with giving of the shekels? And although it says in the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalemite Talmud, explicitly and specifically, that this giving of the half shekel was atonement for the sin of the golden calf, we still have to understand, according to the opinion of the Zohar, according to the Zohar, this collection was taken up before the sin of the golden calf was committed. Since this is one of the 613 mitzvahs, to give half a shekel, the Torah is eternal, forever, so there has to be a general idea behind this and what this is about. And this will be pertinent to every single Jew for all times and all generations. This is where we ask you to take out your yellow markers, your yellow highlight marker, because every single mimer of the Rebbe, in 90% explicitly and in 10% implicitly, give or take a few percent, the Rebbe says something for everybody, forever, and for all time. And then it comes with power. So this is not just Torah study and not just an explanation of a Hasidic concept based on the Torah reading or whatever it may be, but it's also an infusion of power and strength for us to be able to overcome what we have to overcome, to encourage us to grow and to do whatever we have to do in these lessons that the Rebbe gives in the Mamorim. And he says it clearly. And he's going to share it with us. And although the sin of the golden calf is considered a general sin, kenoida, as is known, it's like the sin. That was like the, I don't want to say the poster child of sins. God says, when he forgave her it. And he says, but when I have to think about something that you did, where you messed up, where you botched it up, this was it. So, in a general sense, that's sin. But even though that's a general sin, but since this mitzvah is forever, and it's for all generations, for all Jews, and it's forever, that forces us to say that it's the idea behind it isn't only atonement for the making of the golden calf. And even someone who wasn't connected to the sin of the golden calf. Nevertheless, they had to give the shekel too. The Torah says clearly the Levites didn't do it, many didn't. But nevertheless, everyone had to bring the half a shekel. And therefore, since they had to bring it, then they're connected to the atonement that it brings. So it has to be more of a general thing, not just explicitly for that transgression. And why does it say, when you will uplift, when you will raise, when it's referring to counting? It's not just another any time counting. Then a different term would be used to count, the regular Hebrew term for counting. This is something which is uplifting and uplifting the head. This is something which raises us through this count. Like the Medrashim explain explicitly, that through giving this we are uplifted and we are raised in our devotion, in our status, etc. And why was this a commandment that was given to Moses? God spoke to Moses and saying that when you will count, you, Moses. Why is Moses the one? Moses, our teacher, specifically has to do this. At least, those years, and then subsequently it was collected. Of course, when it says when you will uplift, it's talking about to the one who God is talking to, and God is talking to Moses. The Rebbe says that this is the crux of the explanation. The mitzvah macht shekel the klolis b'chlal. The mitzvah of giving a half shekel alludes to the general idea of how we serve God in general. That's what the idea of giving a half shekel. This symbolizes our service to God. This is pertinent for all Israel. This is connected to everybody. Everybody serves God. Hagodl v'hakotten, young and old and young, big and small. Ha'osher v'hadal, the wealthy and the impoverished. V'ha'inyin hu, the hine klos averes adam yesh bo beis tenuis. When we serve God, generally speaking, there are two ways, two movements, two ways to do it. Schar mitzvah mitzvah, umischara neda mahusa. So the sages have taught us that the reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah. And it's explained that from its reward, Alter Rebbe says that we can understand more of what is the makeup of the mitzvah, what the mitzvah is about. The mitzvah schara einam beis dvarim nifradim elaim beis chatzoim shel eisa mahus. The mitzvah and its reward aren't two separate things. They're two halves of the same thing. So there's the mitzvah and its accomplishment. The reward is also what it brings about. You could look at it, some things in a negative sense, it's a consequence of something which is done, or then there's the reward that's done. But if it's automatic, it's something which happens, then it's really part and parcel of each other. It's the action and the goal, and then the accomplishment.
So the reward is the consequence. It's like a consequence.
In a positive sense.
Direct consequence.
So it's a direct result. So it's one mahus. It's one. It's one thing.
The flip side of the same coin.
Yeah. No pun intended. Ulefikach nikras avodas adam shemachzas shekel. Therefore, the person is doing half. It's the half of a shekel. Ki avodah milmata machzas avodah. What happens here, what we're doing is half of the service. And afterwards we get the half that's coming from above, the supernal half, which is the reward. And this makes the concept of a complete shekel. And like the teaching of the Maggid of Mezrich on the verse which commands us to make 2 trumpets. The word for trumpets is chatzoitzra, and 2 of them is chatzoitzrois, the plural. So Moses commanded to make 2 silver trumpets. So he teaches that the word chatzoitzros can be read like shnei chatzoitzuros, 2 half of a form. Chatzoitz is the word, the ches and the tzadik is like the chatzi, which means half, and the tzrois is like tzurois, is like form. So 2 half forms. Yisrael v'kutrubrichu hem shnei chatzoitzuros. So he says this is the reciprocity, the reciprocal thing. It's Yisrael, the Jewish person, and the other side is God. And they are the 2 sides of the 2 forms that make up the whole form. Like it says in the Medrash, in the Pasuk, Song of Songs, which says, my whole one, my complete one, where it speaks about the beloved, etc. So then it says, to umasi, my twin. Now, the word to win in the English language has, of course, the implication of what we call twins. But in Hebrew, the word to umim means it's the same makeup. Like not only masim, fitting, but to means made up of the same way. So, samosi to umosi. The complete one means the one who's like me, who's exactly like me, the same as me. And we call that also twins. Yisrael v'kutzbrichu hem betachlis ha'achdus kishnei chatzoi dover echad. Israel and the Holy One, blessed be He, are in the ultimate fusion, union, unity, like 2 halves of one whole, of one thing. So this is the unit is made up of Yisrael and God. Where do we see this? How do we see this? So the Rebbe says, for instance, in prayer, and serving God through prayer. Ikar havoida, the main part of serving God in that sense, shehi avoida shebelev, that is the service in the heart. Sheifana hi bevitel legamri, it's properly done with total submission, total subservience. Ka'ab become a more like a servant before his master. And then you become one existence, one thing with God, with the Holy One, blessed be He. To the extent that you say it's the servant serving the master, but the master is so submissive to them, the servant is so submissive to the master, so subservient that he is the master. His action is the master's action. He is one with the master. Like the Rebbe explains it in the continuum of discourses known by their year that it began, Tavish Samachov, the Ozheim Shnei Chatzoim, they're 2 halves of one unit. And that's how it has to be with fulfilling mitzvahs. You understand that when you're fulfilling a mitzvah, you're doing half. There's the piece, the motion that you do here, that you do to fulfill the mitzvah. The taking of the palm branch in the 4 kinds, the putting on the tefillin, the lighting the candle, whatever it may be. And then it's what draws down the spirituality that is mirrored and that's brought down through the act that's done, and then the godliness that's brought into the world. So he says, what we do is half. We're doing the physical part, but it's the part that you don't necessarily see, but it's what is happening. It's the spiritual. Mishum shehu yoidea shachatzi hasheni tzarich liyas nimshach malmayla schar hamitzvah. The second half, the other part, comes down from above, issues forth, and that's the reward of the mitzvah. That's the accomplishment of the mitzvah. That's the result. V'hinei, af shavelis adam tzadatz me'enei l'bchinas machzis kanal. And if that's the case, that whatever we do is only half, b'chol zeh eifan abed tzarich liyas b'shlimusei. So that's not always an encouraging thought. You're only doing half a thing, and then hopefully the other half is coming through. He says, no, you have to give it your all. You have to do it your best. You have to do it in the most complete way possible. Through you doing it your best and with your all in the greatest, fullest way, that's how you draw down the godly half, the half from above. That's why it says when God is telling Moses, when you're going to count them, it should say yitnu. It shouldn't say ze yitnu. It says they should give. Not this is what they should give, because it means this in particular. What is that this in particular that we're talking about? It has to be the ultimate type of giving. Like our sages teach, that when somebody gives, you give it with your good eye, meaning to say you give your best. If you're already giving, you give quality, you give nice, you give if you don't give like a, let me see, go see and I'll give you something, dump it. When you're giving a gift, you give it a nice, you give properly. Sheneis and Atzmei, in this sense, he gives himself b'hismasrus gemura muchletas, with total giving over and submission, and just giving yourself over. V'kabal seil adlim sidus nefesh, with accepting upon oneself the yoke, even if it's tough, up until self-sacrifice. And that's why it says that half the shekel is only 10 geda, right? We said we have to give half a shekel. A shekel is 20 geda. Comes out that you have to give 10. Why? Because your devotion has to imbue and invigorate and permeate all of your 10 faculties of your soul, all of your 10 attributes, parts, chesed, gevura, chokhmah, bina das, the intellectual part, wisdom, understanding, knowledge, kindness, severity, beauty, etc. All the 10 spheres. And through this, you evoke and bring about that we draw forth the 10 faculties of God, of the supernal faculties. To the extent that we get the most supernal, the ones that are called makifim, that are, so to speak, surrounding, that don't penetrate because they are equal universally, everywhere, and they are of the loftiest level. And that also comes through, because that's the beginning of breaking down into the 10 faculties. And then the 10 faculties supernally comes to the 10 faculties that we have, etc. What is it? What's the explanation? Here the Rebbe quotes famous chapter in Tanya, beginning of chapter 41, which the Rebbe asked people to even study this by heart, to commit this to memory, to make this part of your gray matter in your brain, this idea. So in other words, not just to know this, but to actually have this committed and seared into your gray matter of the brain. Because that's what happens when you know something by heart, with all your heart, right? Now he's going to paraphrase, but the beginning of serving God and its source, its root. In other words, the most fundamental part of serving God is this idea of zeh yitnu. You have to give this devotion to being given, to give of oneself with focus, with purpose, etc. Avoided the Kabbalah soil. And this is the idea of accepting the yoke. It's submission. It's understanding to do what God wants. Kivur Betanya, like it says in the beginning of chapter 41. There it says that, of course, Reishis Avoid the Vikra Rosh, and he goes straight to Kabbalah soil. Doesn't mention the Yitnu, this idea of the shekel. Just talks there of acceptance of the yoke. In other words, doing what you have to do. To the extent that you have to have self-sacrifice for this. Like it says, you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya again, subsequently in the chapter, that when you serve God by studying Torah and performing mitzvahs, and that's your occupation, that's what you do, it's like you're giving yourself total self-sacrifice, giving yourself to God, because your whole occupation is doing what God wants. So you're giving yourself to God by performing the mitzvahs, by studying Torah. Kitseis haneshama min aguf. It's just like if somebody, heaven forbid, had to do something that actually made the soul leave the body. Why? Why is it like that? Why are those two compared? Because at the time that you're studying Torah, the time that you're performing a mitzvah, you're not occupying yourself with doing things for your own self, for your body, and for what you're doing for your soul at that time. So then it's like your soul. The total focus is on your soul. So it's almost as if to say your soul has separated from the body. Now the soul is using the body to do the mitzvah, but it's the same siddur nefesh because you're devoting yourself to what the soul wants, not what your body wants at that moment. So you're not eating at that moment. You're not taking a suntan. You're not doing some other things, whatever it may be. Because at that time, when you're studying Torah, when you're performing mitzvah, you're not connected at that moment to your physicality, to your material makeup. The inyan of Mesidus Nefesh, Hushleimus, Kabbalah Seil. Self-sacrifice is the ultimate of accepting the yoke upon yourself. So if this is what will be at the forefront of what you're going to do, and this will be the introduction, so to speak, this will be the foundation to accept upon yourself the yoke of heaven, the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, to the extent that you're ready to give yourself up totally, total self-sacrifice, then what will you get to? So once you have the right attitude, then you can get involved in the details, how to do it, because your focus is to serve God, how God wants it, no matter what it is. And then you have to do what the Torah says to do. First it says you will love God with all your heart, with all your soul, all your might. And then it says, you'll speak the words of God. There, when you talk about it, means words of Torah that you're talking about. You'll tie the sign on your hand, that's the tefillin. The whole Torah, meaning the mitzvah and the Torah, are all compared to tefillin. And like it says explicitly in the second paragraph of Shema, that it speaks about accepting the yoke of mitzvahs. And then this whole idea of the self-sacrifice has to permeate all 10 faculties of the soul. Esa Geta, that's represented, like we said, the 10 Geta. That's the monetary value, because the shekel is 20 Geta. We know that generally speaking, the complete number, a number of the first complete unit is considered to be 10. That's the first complete number. Even though in a general sense, our sages taught us that we don't all think the same. As a matter of fact, everyone is unique. Everybody's different. So every individual is different than everybody else. Everybody's totally unique. But nevertheless, we can be divided up into 10 categories. Now, within those categories, everyone is still unique. So, these 10 categories are the categories that are enumerated in Deuteronomy, from the head of your tribes till the water carriers and everyone in between that are enumerated in the verse, the beginning of the portion of the Tzavim. First of all, some of the commentaries there count out 8 categories. Right? So anyway, it goes through, says that it's really 8 in the verse. Nevertheless, the Zohar says that it's 10 types. It explains it. It says right away the heads of the tribes. That's already 2 things: the heads and the tribes. It's already 2 instead of 1, etc. That's all of them. Just like it is generally amongst the Klal Yisrael, amongst the Jewish people, that they're divided up into 10 types, 10 types. Take out the yellow marker. And like we said earlier, the Rebbe always says in a mimer, and gives us the explicit strength to go through, and like we said before. So this is each and every person. Just like in Klal Yisrael, we're divided up into 10. Each and every individual has also the 10 faculties. Maybe every Jew is a mirror of the whole Klal Yisrael, a reflection of the whole Klal Yisrael. Like it says in the Talmud, like the Talmud says, therefore, since everyone is individual, everyone has to say that the world was created for me, and anyone who saves even one person, someone who sustains one person, is like he has sustained the whole world. And if you're the whole world, so then you're like the whole nation. If everyone is a world in and of themselves, because the first person was created alone, no one else is in the world, to teach us that everyone is like the first person. Everyone is totally unique. Everyone is important. The mere fact that you're here is because you're important. Because your input is what's needed. And it's individualized to you. It's unique to you. You have to do your part. Someone else has to do their part. But their part is not your part, and your part is not their part. So everyone is the whole world. And if everyone is the whole world, then certainly everyone is the whole Klal Yisrael. Now, everyone else in Klal Yisrael is also the whole Klal Yisrael. Everyone else also has their part. But everyone is the whole thing. V'lachin yesh gam ken aseres asugim shebcholos Yisrael v'heim esek eches nafshe. So these same, just like there's 10 types of Roshechem, Shiftechem, from the heads till the water carriers, similarly we have that all within our own faculties of our own soul. And that's why half a shekel is 10 geda. Mishum sheshleimus aveda dezayitnu, because the fulfillment of serving God with, you should give this in particular, with this devotion. Serving God with accepting the yoke of heaven and with self-sacrifice, that is what has to permeate all of your faculties. If not, it's not going to work. You have to be totally devoted. And through this type of devotion and this type of focus and this attitude, we draw forth and bring down the 10 supernal faculties until we're able to bring down the highest from before God even imbues energy into the world through these faculties. And therefore, together with God, as a mirror image, we make up the 20 gera of the complete shekel. So now the Rebbe takes this a few steps further. The Rebbe says, if this is so phenomenal, that this illustrates our partnership with God. And God says that number one, we do the mitzvah, and then He does His part, and the world is imbued with the spirituality. And how are we doing this? Through total devotion, through self-sacrifice, through focus, and through being enthralled with the godliness and enthusiastic about the mitzvah, and not focusing on our bodily and what we need and other things, but we're focused on the mitzvah. So then we bring godliness to the world. Then we make up the whole unit, the complete unit, the whole shekel. So now the Rebbe takes it a step further. He says, and from those shekels that were taken then in the desert, what did they make? Because the Torah explains there are 3 collections taken up in the desert. Then there's a collection every year. And the one collection was to create the tabernacle, the Mishkan, and one was they purchased the offerings, and that's the one that was subsequently for all generations. And then there was also one that they made, and this is what the Rebbe is going to talk about over here, was a Yuvan Gam a shekel also as Adonim. That from the half shekel they made the sockets. The way the Mishkan, the sanctuary, was made with boards that were covered up, but on the bottom they had a little bit of a more narrow piece that fit into a base that was made from silver, and they fit into these sockets, and this is what made them stand, so to speak. And then they were held together with bars on the outside. There was a bar on the inside, as is enumerated there in Parshas Truma. And this is the Talmud says this in the Tractate of Shekalim. The Rebbe says here something parenthetically. Ulahoyer al dvar pele shemesechta Shekalim mitalmud Yerushalmi nidfus v'tfus harish shel hashas ben kol mesechtas Talmud Bavli. In the first print of the Talmud, which was over 500 years ago, together with the Babylonian Talmud, the tractate of the Jerusalemite Talmud of Shekalim was printed with the Babylonian Talmud, which might be, it's just a parenthetical parentheses, Ben Kol Mesechtas Talmud Bavli. That, well, let's first continue what the Rebbe says. This is certainly by divine providence, and certainly there is a lesson in this in how we can serve God. Certainly because, like the Baal Shem Tov teaches us, everything in the world is a lesson in how we can serve God. So certainly if something in Torah was done, so it's certainly significant. That happens to be, before we get back into the Maimer, that the first edition of Talmud wasn't even printed by Jewish people. It was assisted by the Jewish people were involved, but it was the one at the advent of the printing press till Jews actually started printing was printed by I believe by Bamberg, whatever it was, the first press. It's just an interesting thing that when people learn the cycle of learning a page of Talmud every single day, they learn the Talmud Bavli. And there was a discussion a few days prior to this mimer being said, and that's why stated other times, that it's important when we learn the mimer also to look at the time when it was said and the time frame and what was going on, etc., and things that the Rebbe said at the rest of the gathering. That Rebbe many times explains the mimer more, or other things that are going on in the world, etc. So within a few days of this, within a couple of weeks actually, the Rebbe had discussed the learning a page a day of Talmud Yerushalmi with the Rosh Yeshiva of Ger that had an audience with him, who later subsequently became the Rebbe of Ger, Rabbi Menachem Alter, and that was part of their discussion, was about learning the Talmud, and the Rebbe was even giving him counsel and advice of to include the Mishnah in it, even parts that we don't have it, so they should go through the whole Talmud, so to speak. And the Rebbe also spoke about how it's done in the what's called, people learn every single day, a page of Talmud. So that program is called the Daf Yomi, and the Gerer Rebbe and the Gerer Chassidus had instituted and the Rebbe promoted it, endorsed it, to learn every day a page of Yerushalmi. There's because not having for a friend to say that it was neglected or whatever, but it was the new thing then and around that time, and they were in the first cycle. In this discussion, the Rebbe discusses there some of these ideas, and now here the Maimer, the Rebbe actually speaks about this idea, and it just happens to be that when they learn the Bavli cycle, they learn the Shekalim, the Shekalim from the Yerushalmi. Now it happens to be there isn't Bavli on Shekalim, but there's other things also, and it's a bit of a mystery. Why was it done? But maybe partially because the first Talmud was printed as such, and maybe there are other reasons. But it's just an interesting parenthetical discussion here, and you see that the Rebbe actually brings it in within the Maimer, this idea of parenthetically when he mentions an idea from the tractate of Shekalim, that it was printed together with the Bavli. And those that learn the whole cycle of the Shas, so to speak, in the 7.5-year cycle, they also learn this piece out of the Yerushalmi. The Rebbe also mentions there, he doesn't know why they didn't institute to learn the Mishnah. You know, if you want to go through the whole Shas, you have to also learn the Mishnayos, the rest of the Mishnayos, and there are Gemaras that has the Mishnayos, etc., etc. And the Rebbe said that in the Daf Yomi it wasn't instituted, so it has to be done on the side or whatever it is. But the Rebbe says since you're still in this first cycle of the Yerushalmi, they should institute it there. And the Rebbe said other things too, which are not for here now, but I just wanted to mention it. Okay. No, nothing is by accident, nothing's by mistake, everything's by divine providence. Like the Rebbe says here, everything, if like the Baal Shem Tov says, even a blade of grass and a leaf that's flying is by divine providence. There's certainly something about Torah, and the way the Torah was printed, etc., etc. Okay, so getting back to what the Rebbe is actually talking about, this idea that from that collection of half shkolim, they made the adonim, which were the sockets, the foundations of the Mishkan. Shatam adover hu mishum shu adonim im kekarka, like the Gemara in Yerushalmi says elsewhere, that the sockets are like the actual ground, karka. Shal yodam im demakroshim, and through them the boards of the Mishkan were able to stand. Shlo yuchlu lozuz came, they wouldn't move because they were implanted. They had a protruding piece on the bottom of them that fit into those sockets, into the hollow of the Adonim. The zehu inin avedas machzah shekel zeh yitnu avedas hakabala sel shu yiseid kol avedas adam. Now look how that makes the connection. The zeh yitnu, the zeh, which is alluding to the Kabbalah soil, the devotion, the self-sacrifice, which has to be the foundation of how you perform the mitzvahs. And that is the idea of the machzah shekel. It's only half, and God gives the other half. And then this is done and symbolized through the shekel. So from this shekel, they made the socket. This socket is the foundation of the Mishkan that holds it up. So it's the foundation of our service to God, and it's the foundation of what we have to do. Because ultimately, the temple symbolizes the ultimate service to God on this earth. V'zehu, now the Rebbe goes back to some of the discussion that we discussed at the beginning of the Maimer. V'zehu, gam hashakotzav ashli arba v'adali amit, that the wealthy one shouldn't give more and the impoverished one shouldn't give less than half a shekel. De'ifan avedez shel mesiris kol esa keches nafshei tzarich liyez gam begodel shebegdei limoshe v'gam bekodel shebektanim da'al. Everyone has to have mesiris nefesh. This way of serving God with giving over and devoting the 10 faculties of the soul has to be equal by the greatest of the great, the wealthy, and the smallest of the small, the most impoverished, the poor. Elo, but everyone is according to what they can do and what they have to do. So the wealthy one represents someone who has very great faculties that are accomplished and honed and wonderful and talented. Someone who may be poor or impoverished or what's called here slow. He feels, I'm not so talented, I'm not so this. Doesn't matter. You got to give what you got. So it has to be devoted totally. Doesn't make a difference. Whether you're wealthy or whether you're poor, no matter what you feel about yourself, no matter what you have, and everybody's talents are different. So it doesn't make a difference. Everyone is unique and everyone is necessary. Visiting and being in a hospital, sometimes you tell a person, one person, everyone is very important. It's maybe just a microcosm of the world. But everyone, takes a village. Everyone is necessary. So some person comes in, and they're mopping the floor in the patient's room. And usually, people are, I'm sure, let's just go by pay scale. Pay grade. We're not going to talk about yet how to judge the importance. And the people who are mopping the floor, which are usually immigrants, they don't necessarily even speak yet the language, but they're able to do this because you don't have to talk a lot. And I tell them, you're the most important worker in the hospital. Because if it's not clean here, person could get germs and infection or whatever else, God forbid. And the greatest doctor, you have to have medicine, you have to have other things. So here there's a surgeon who's doing this and this, and here you're mopping the floor. You're both doing with devotion, promoting the health of the patient. Now here this one person's getting paid whatever, one person's getting paid whatever. But nevertheless, they're both promoting the health. And in a certain sense, you could say equally. Because if it's going to be dirty, and a person just had brain surgery or heart surgery, whatever it is, and they catch, what they say in Hebrew, they catch, God forbid, some kind of a horrific germ, then the whole thing is worthless. So everyone is a part. Everyone is just as important. So everyone's got to work with Mesiras Nefesh. Everyone has to give their most. So the Bnei and they both have 10 faculties of the soul. This one was trained to do brain surgery. This one's trained to mop the floor. And they're both important to promote the health of the patient. So it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what it is. Everyone's got to serve. And it's not even a question of being stuck there. Maybe later they'll learn the language. They'll become a brain surgeon themselves. It's not a question of who's better or who's worse. Or maybe they don't want to become a brain surgeon. They're very happy doing this. Doesn't matter. Because they are promoting the health. So this is a lesson in devotion and importance. And everyone has to give their all. The Bnei yesh esa kechas davke. Everyone's got 10 faculties. Kivon shenikru Adam. Al Shem Adam le'elyon. Everyone's called a person. Why is a person called Adam? Why is man called Adam? Because Adam le'elyon. They are similar to the supernal man, quote unquote. Adam ha'elyon. Adam le'elyon. They're similar to God. And supernally, there are also these 10 faculties. And Esav Teisha, Esav Achadasar, and precisely 10, 10 at 9, and 10 at 11. Like it says in the Sefer Yetzirah. Exactly 10. But everyone is unique according to what they are graced with. Everybody is different. And mitzvahs also are the exact amount of mitzvahs, and a mitzvah is done in a certain way. You can't add, you can't diminish the amount of mitzvahs and what the mitzvah has to be done, how the mitzvah has to be done. Now we could start understanding and answering the question that we asked at the outset. Why is this mitzvah considered atonement? Koifer nafshe, atonement for the soul. Hine, koifer hugam miloshen chalifim. Koifer also comes, the word atonement also comes from a terminology that connotates exchange. In other words, exchanging the tough, bad feelings, the feelings of being upset, to feelings of appeasement and being happy with them. So when somebody wants to atone for something, there's a rift between, let's say it's between two individuals, and you ask atonement, ask forgiveness, because one regrets what they did. One feels bad about it. One feels bad about the rift that they caused. So when atonement is granted or brought about, then it changes to have that tough, hard feeling to a feeling of goodwill, a feeling of appeasement. So there's the idea of changing, of chlipin, that comes with atonement. You change yourself around. I'm not the one who wanted to be aggressive, etc. I'm the one who's going to be nice, etc. This is the self-sacrifice. A person can affect within himself a change, total change of nature even. Like we said in the previous mimer, that this means to leave your comfort zone. A lot of times the Rebbe talks about this, an idea that he spoke about in the previous mimer a week earlier or whatever it is, and he brings it and adds it into the coming mimer. So although it may not be an official continuum, but nevertheless, the concept he's already talking about it, and we'll talk about it in a few weeks in a row. So here he also said it then, the mimer of Akiva Yehudim, the mimer a week earlier, that to leave your comfort zone, like God told Abraham, leave your land and your birthplace and your father's home, which symbolizes what a person may have gotten through nature and nurture in their environment, and do what's the right thing. Don't focus on what you're happy with and what you enjoy and whatever. It's okay to enjoy, to do what God wants you to do, but that has to be your focus, and not because or how you like to, not your comfort zone, because then you're serving yourself, but to do what God wants. God is asking of you. So just like Abraham was told to leave your land, your father's home, and your birthplace and your father's home. In other words, what you're used to and what you got, what you grew up with, and what your nature may be. excuse me, sheyetze mitivoi regilusai, you should leave your nature and what you're used to. Ukibeis and ischoyes bazeh. I like the two versions that are about changing your nature. Shinu midoisav ativim, shinu teva midoisav, to change your natural attributes or to change the nature of your attributes. like the Rebbe explains. This is what it's about, that half shekel is the atonement for the soul. Not just to atone for the sin of the golden calf. The whole idea is that through this you are leaving what you like and what you want and what you're used to, and you're focusing and devoting yourself to what God wants. And therefore it's atonement, because it's change, it's growth, it's turning yourself, transforming yourself. Shinui teva mideisav. So that's the way to leave your land, what you're used to, etc. That's the real the ultimate. Shinui teva mideisav, to change the nature of your faculties and your attributes. You become a new being. So one could change. It takes work. It takes mesiras nefesh. It takes kabbalah sale, self-sacrifice, accepting the yoke, work, devotion. But you could do it. And the Rebbe not only says you could do it, but he's giving you the power to do it. And when you study this, the energy comes through. This is the Torah is not just a haidah, not just a lesson, not just doesn't tell us, but sometimes we struggle. We need this extra encouragement and know-how and understanding how to do this. And that's what the Maimer is about. The Maimer was something that the Rebbe gave from the highest level in a way that we saw this. The Rebbe literally held a handkerchief because he was delivering something from the most supernal sense to the most physical of the world to help us out. And that's a focus that we should have, that it's not just a study when we learn a Maimer, an intellectual pursuit and understanding in a Torah study, but also that it's a hashpah, it's energy that the Rebbe gives us, our soul directly, by studying these concepts and understanding that Torah is miloshon haidah. Torah is an instruction, it's a lesson, it's how we live our life. And that comes through in the Maimer in the highest way possible. The Rebbe gives us all kinds of hashpahs, all kinds of energy. You look at a picture of the Rebbe, the face of the Holy Tzaddik. You look at a video, you read what the Rebbe wrote, his handwriting, an edit, a verse, a talk, a Torah. It's all part of the hashpah. And on the highest level, the deepest part, and what we need the most strength, that comes from the Maimer. It's the part of the importance of studying it. So let's see what we can get now from the rest of this Maimer. Valpi kolanal yuvan gam machine machzeh shekel koshem ki Sisa Bnei Yisrael. Now we'll understand why this idea of giving half the shekel is connected with when you will uplift the head of the children of Israel. And Sisa Rosh davke, this uplifting of the head, this strange terminology of counting by saying when you will raise the head. God telling Moses. The Rosh Bnei Yisrael Yamunish Yisrael. The Rebbe says this in other memorim too. The Rebbe explains this. And sometimes we see that the Rebbe talks every 10 years about something. So we see this also 10 years before this. The Rebbe spoke about this idea. So the Rosh Bnei Yisrael, the faith that we have, that's the head of the children of Israel. The belief in the faith. And that so our service should be in the ultimate sense. With the true self-sacrifice of the 10 faculties. You need that the amunah, the belief in the faith in God, has to permeate all of the 10 faculties, but the innermost faculties of the soul. And as we know, as it says in Chassidus, could be a situation that the belief and the faith is in a way that hasn't yet permeated, that it's called makif. It's still, again, like that surrounding idea, that idea that it's all around, it's everywhere, it's universal, but it's not yet in. You haven't drawn it down, it hasn't become part. And in other words, people believe in God, but then there's the idea, it brings in other places, like there's even the guy, he goes and he steals, right? Before he makes a hit, prays to God that it should go well. So it's bizarre. This is the sages tell us this. So what's wrong with this guy? If he believes in God, why is he stealing? But he hasn't made the connection. He hasn't brought it down into his innermost that it influences him to do the right thing. And many of us have this on various levels, let's just say. So, he says like this. The thief, when he's on the doorstep of the where he's going to steal, he prays to God. He has this faith that he should pray to God. He still remains the thief who's on the what's the word I'm looking for? Let's just say the doorstep, the threshold of stealing. He's doing the opposite of the supernal will. God said, don't steal. He's stealing, and he's asking God to make it a successful hit. So in order for this faith, which is maybe surrounding and not yet permeated, hasn't yet imbued the person and made them do the right thing, but in order that this faith should permeate and affect the person, so that he shouldn't be the thief on the threshold. How do you do this? You have to put up on a high level, raise the faith very high. Like they said, and if it's very high, it's able to come very low, into the toughest of the tough, into the greatest of the challenges. What does that mean? Means pick up your belief. Think about God. To focus on the first mitzvah in Torah is not to believe in God. Rebbe explains this at length, several places. The mitzvah is to promote your knowledge of God and to bolster and strengthen your knowledge of God, so that then your belief comes higher and stronger and higher and more. The faith is there automatically, because if you don't believe in God, there's nobody even giving you a mitzvah. Belief is something that we have intrinsically. We have it as an inheritance from Abraham. Some people have it very, very covered up. It's hard to tap into. Others have it more. We all believe, right? More and more. But the more we could study, we learn Chassidus, learn more about God, that bolsters this faith. So here the Rebbe says, and then this gets you more involved, so that it's easier. It's in other words, you appreciate more the things that you have to do and the things that you have to abstain from. That's what you don't have to do. You shouldn't do. And that's why this uplifting of the faith has to be by Moshe, has to be by the great Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher Moshe, Dafka, specifically. And the Rebbe explains, Ki hine Moshe Rabbeinu nikrei neman. Moshe Rabbeinu is called the faithful shepherd. Shehoya roya hamasal tzein marisei v'ad lektanim shebehem. So the Rebbe talks about the fact that Moshe was actually an actual shepherd that was given over to his flock, to even the smallest runaway little sheep, lamb. And as the Medrash specifically tells us, right? We know that when Moshe is introduced, and he's by Pharaoh, he's born, he's this, he runs away to Midian, he becomes the shepherd of the sheep of his father-in-law. So our rabbis taught, when Moses was the shepherd of the sheep of his father-in-law, Yisrael, in the desert, so one small kid of the sheep fled, and Moshe Rabbeinu chased it. Moshe Rabbeinu ran after it. Chulu. The story over there is, the Medrash continues, that the sheep didn't have what to eat and what to drink, because the bigger sheep was pushing it, whatever it was, and Moshe Rabbeinu gave it its own individualized attention, that it was able to drink and able to eat, etc. So God said, you know what, you have mercy, you even care, you give a hoot about even this little sheep that couldn't get it, you bothered you even this one sheep. Everywhere the flock was going pretty good. So, well, huge flocks, what's a little sheep? Moshe Rabbeinu went after that sheep. So you have mercy. You have compassion. Tiretzoni Yisrael, may you be the shepherd of my sheep, Israel, my flock. V'hainu, what does this mean? She'efin hariyah shel Moshe hu ad shenimshach iktanim ktanim tachas hashlemus. The way Moses shepherds the flock, the way he takes care, is that his shepherding prowess goes forth to even the smallest of the small, and in the best way possible. Totally individualized to everybody, no matter who and what. That's why Moshe is the befitting one, to bring the faith into the innermost. And like it says, you shepherd faith so that it permeates us like food, like food sustains, like sustenance. One of the words comes from the same root. That means a shepherd also means fodder or animal feed for the sheep. So it brings this faith into us, and it satiates us, and it sustains us. והטעם לדבר שדווקא מיישה ביכולת להמשיך זמונה של המעלה הוא משום שנאמר במיישה מיישה, אלי פסיק טיים בגביה. And the reason why it's specifically Moshe, when Moshe meets God for that first time at the burning bush, God calls to him, and God says twice, which illustrates how dear Moshe is, how special he is. Only certain individuals have the name called twice. Now, when the Torah is written, the Torah also has cantillations. Cantillations, of course, are not in the Torah itself. It's part of the Mesoida. It's what's handed down. So it's part of the oral Torah. But you could see it in a Chumash or in other texts that have the cantillations, and that also helps us understand the meaning of, let's say, a part of a verse could go on the words that precede it or the words that follow it. So, for instance, if there's a cantillation tipcha, shows us that the word is connected to the word before it, right? The little sideways comma that's going from the upper left to the lower right. That shows that the word is going to before it. And we're not going to give a whole lesson now into the significance or the understanding of what the cantillations teach us, but each one does have part of the understanding, and not only that, it also tells us how to sing it, and tells us a story, etc., when the Torah is read publicly. One of the cantillations is, and it's really not one that you could even sing out, so to speak. Some of the Sephardic readers do, but they raise their voice a little bit. It's called a psik. A psik means that there's actually a line in the cantillation between two words. It's a vertical line, and sometimes when you see it in a chumash, if you're reading the chumash, you might not even notice it. Even if you're a person who notices trop, you notice the cantillations. When it says this time, when Moshe, other times when it says two people's names, there is a psik. You have to stop for a minute, for a pause for a moment. But when Moshe Rabbeinu was called by God twice in a row, his name Moshe, so it's without this psik, this cantillation, which is actually called psik, which means an interruption or stop, a separation. And that's actually the name of the cantillation. So here, why could it be Moshe? Why is Moshe the one who does? We had a lot of great leaders and great ancestors, and nevertheless, this is the one that Rebbe brings here, is because Moshe, when he meets God, the Torah describes the meeting and describes what happened. God called out and he said to him, Moshe, Moshe, without any stop, without even a pause. He didn't wait any hesitation, anything, nothing to stop it, to separate. Moshe, Moshe. Loi psik time b'gavayu. The loi k'Avram Avinu psik time b'gavayu we read every day. The binding of Isaac, we say Avram, Avram. But between Avram number 1 to Avram number 2, there's a psik. Avraham, Avraham. You have to stop when you read it for a moment. Right? Now, Abraham is great. And Abraham also, he says, Avram, Avram. And it says there's a few that it says the name twice. So, what's the significance of that fact that there's no psik? Psik is just a little, it still says that they're named twice. It's important, it's phenomenal. And here, what's so significant that Moshe didn't have it? Because by Moshe drawing down godliness on this world was exactly like the godliness the way it is in its most supernal form and fashion, which is not something that all of us can feel or perceive or get. Whereas Moshe Rabbeinu, by him, everything was God. There was one big thing, and that's why Moshe didn't even have a psik. When God said his name was Moshe, Moshe. Well, derech zeh, look at this. Look at the next gift. Take out the yellow markers. Take out the highlighters here. Well, derech zeh hu gam b'chol Yisrael u'b'chol hadeiros. Every one of Yisrael in all of the generations. Why? Look at the gift that the Rebbe is giving you. The Rebbe is telling you this is not just Moshe at the burning bush. This is you, and this is me, and this is everybody of all generations. Because we each have a piece of Moses in us. Through that little piece of Moses that's in every single Jew. Everyone has a little piece of Moshe. And the Rebbe goes through here, we'll talk about it in a moment. Through the little Moshe within you. In a moment we'll talk about how we know there's a little Moshe in you. This great belief that you have, and this great belief that is uplifted through Moshe, comes into your most inner faculties, in a way that it's no separation. You're able to also bring godliness here on this world like godliness is there. Now, the lesson that the Rebbe speaks here refers to what it says in the Talmud, and the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, that the Chazal, the rabbis, the Talmud teach us that it says, Moshe is talking, and Moshe is saying to the Jewish people, and now hear you Jewish people, what is God already asking of you? Just he wants you a little bit to fear him, a little Yiddish Shemayim, a little fear of God, a little fear of heaven, right? Kim li yira. That's all he's asking of you. So what's the big deal? So the Talmud says, wait a minute. Is fear of God such a simple thing? Yiddish Shemayim? That's something you don't get help with. You have to work on fearing heaven. In other words, being awed of heaven, and that should affect what you do. So how does Moshe Rabbeinu come and tell the Jews, it's not such a big deal. All he wants is a little fear of heaven. So the Gemara says, Moshe Rabbeinu, it's no big deal. So how does that answer the question? He's talking to all of us. And Moshe Rabbeinu is not talking about what's for himself a big deal, not a big deal. He means for you it's not a big deal. So if the Talmud says, for Moshe it's not a big deal, then it's because there's a piece of Moshe in all you and every one of us. So for us it's also not a big deal, because we all have a piece of Moshe in us. For that piece, it's also not a big deal. And then we have to get in touch with that piece. So the Alter Rebbe explains that, otherwise the Gemara didn't answer the question. The Gemara says, Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, all he wants is that you should have a little bit of fear of heaven. Yes, he says, that's a big deal. He says, no, it's not a big deal for Moshe. But he's not talking to Moshe, he's not talking to himself, he's talking to us. And the Gemara says, how would the Gemara have answered the question by saying, for Moshe it's not a big deal? Because we all have some of Moshe in us. So now we have that piece of Moshe, we're able to bring this into our, and the Rebbe gives this gift and says, wake it up, tap into this energy, tap into the Moshe that's inside of you. You have this Moshe, and he's dragging this Amunah, he's dragging this faith into you. Just wake it up, just do it. And then this will help you with everything. This will help, and this will bring you fulfillment. And this will bring your understanding and appreciation of the self-sacrifice that you have. Now that it might have been tough and harder, and now you'll appreciate it properly. So the Rebbe says now, the last few lines, and through drawing this type of faith in your innermost faculties, through that little Moshe that's in you, again, take out the yellow markers, that's in that little Moshe that everyone has. The Moshe lipsik time and then we also have that piece then that there's no interruption, that the way it is in heaven, the way it is on earth, the way we do the mitzvah, we bring God down equally. Because we have that Moshe piece. Then we come to the fulfillment and the complete redemption without any interruption. Why? It says that Moshe Rabbeinu in the Medrash says, and in other places, that Moshe is the first Redeemer. We know that Mashiach is the final Redeemer, but Mashiach has with him in a Moshe in a revealed way. So that's why it says that Moshe is the first Redeemer, Moshe is the final Redeemer. If you notice, the first two letters of Mashiach is the same first two letters of Moshe's name, right? Mem Shin. So it has Moshe and it has Mashiach. Now, a lot of things to be said about that. Moshe is a Hey, and Mashiach is 18, Yud Ches, etc., etc. It's not for here, but it says that Moshe is the first Redeemer and he's the final Redeemer. May he come and redeem us and bring us upright to our land. Speedily in our days, actually. Amen.
Amen.
Oh yeah.